Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com. Today we're going to make orange date muffins, and this is what they look like. This is such a flavorful muffin. It has dates and walnuts and cinnamon and orange juice and whole wheat flour. So the first thing you need to do is to preheat your oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 190 degrees Celsius. And you will need a 12-cup muffin pan. Now, I'm going to just butter my muffin cups, and what I've done is just melt a little bit of butter and then use a pastry brush and brush the insides. If you wanted to, you could just spray your muffin cups with one of those non-stick sprays, or if you want, you could, use the paper liners and just put the paper liners in there. So, muffins are quick bread, so they're fairly easy to make. Just dry ingredients, wet ingredients, mix them together, and we're done. You could use an electric stand mixer or a hand mixer if you want. I'm not going to. I'm going to do it by hand today. So in a large bowl, you will need 1 cup, which is 130 grams of all-purpose flour. You may know that as plain flour. And then I'm going to add 1 cup, 130 grams of whole wheat flour. Make it a little more healthy. And so I like to use a combination of the two flours. Whole wheat flour can tend to make things a little more dense texture. That's why I'm using a combo of the whole wheat and the all-purpose. And then sugar, 2/3 of a cup, 140 grams of firmly packed light brown sugar. And then we will need 2 teaspoons, which is 8 grams of baking powder, a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, which is 2 grams, and then a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, another 2 grams, and a 1/2 teaspoon of ground cinnamon. I think the cinnamon really, boosts up the flavor of our muffins. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my hands here because there's a few lumps in the brown sugar. So I'm just going to use my fingers to get rid of those. You could use a wire whisk, spoon. And then what I'm going to do is you will need a 1/2 cup, which is about 55 grams of chopped. I'm using walnuts here. I like the flavor of walnuts and dates. You could use another type. You could use pecans. You could use almonds, hazelnuts, or you can just leave them out if you want. So I'm just going to put that in there. And then, let's get this out of the way. You will need 3/4 of a cup, which is 110 grams of chopped dates. And this is what they look like. This is a date. Usually I find these kind of dates, they're usually sold in plastic tubs. And for some reason, they're like normally, at least around where I live, you find them in like the produce section of your grocery store. Sometimes they're hidden. You may have to ask. And then, so you can usually buy them either with the pits in or without. Normally, I find the pits are still in. So what you need to do is just cut into your date and just take that out and then just chop that up, which I've already done here. Now these are you want to make sure they're not dry and shriveled up. You want really nice, soft dates, so just always check the expiry date on when you're buying them. So I'm going to put those in there, and then I'm going to use my fingers because you can see this is kind of like a big clump even though I've cut them up, and I want to use the flour to kind of separate the dates. So just mix that all in as best as you can, because you don't want big clumps of dates in your muffins and then parts don't have any. Okay, pretty happy with that. Hopefully I've got them all done. So now in a separate bowl, let's take my hands off here. For our wet ingredients, you will need 1 large egg. Have your egg at room temperature and then just break it up here with a wire whisk. Then you will need, I'm going to flavor with about 1 teaspoon, 4 grams of pure vanilla extract. You could leave it out, but as you probably know, I'm a big fan of vanilla. So Everything tastes better to me with vanilla. And then you will need 3/4 of a cup, which is 180 milliliters of buttermilk. And buttermilk, I like to use that because it gives your muffins more bread-like texture. Now you can buy commercially made buttermilk. You can even now, I find, buy buttermilk powder, or you can make a good substitute at home. Just take 3/4 of a cup, 180 milliliters of milk, and then just take about 3/4 of a tablespoon of lemon juice, stir it together, let it sit right on the counter for 10 minutes, and you have a great substitute. So, if you can't find it or you don't want to buy a whole container just for 3/4 of a cup, making your own is perfectly acceptable. And then we have orange flavor. Now, you will need 1/3 of a cup, which is 80 milliliters of, I like to use freshly squeezed orange juice. And what I do, that's about one large orange. Any variety you want. Now, you want to take off we want the orange zest from that orange, and that's the outer orange skin. You don't want to grate underneath that white because it's kind of bitter. And I used one of these microplanes. You could just use a box grater, and then you just kind of scrape it off and do that first, and then cut it in half, and then I have one of these juicers, and you just squeeze that. And then what I do to get rid of any pulp or seeds, I put a strainer over my measuring cup, and then that way we won't get any seeds, or you don't have to try to fish them out there. So it's 1/3 of a cup of orange juice. Put that in there. And then our last ingredient, as you can tell, there's lots of good stuff in here, 5 tablespoons, which is 70 grams of melted butter. And then melt your butter and then let it cool down. You don't want to put hot butter in there or everything will curdle, which we don't want. So all that good stuff is mixed together. So I just want to, again, break up that orange zest. Don't want big clumps of that either. And I'm just making it like a well in the center of my dry ingredients, and just pour in the wet, and we mix it all together, and we are done. These are great for breakfast, with some yogurt, some fruit, and then we're just going to stir this together. Pack it in the kids' lunch, a nice muffin. Now, when you want to make sure everything is moistened, and then stop mixing once you've done that, because if you tend to mix too much, your muffins can be a little tough, which we don't want, of course. So just mix until everyth's moistened. That's one reason I like to do it by hand, because I can see what I'm doing here. Okay, so we're done there. So move everything out of the way. So now you want to fill your muffin cups, kind of each one with the same amount, so they bake in the same length of time. I'm using just an ice cream scoop. If you don't have one, that's fine. Just use 2 spoons. And I find it's about, what's that, about 2/3 to 3/4 full each one. Ends up. Okay, so that looks good. So now, I find for these muffins in my oven, everybody's oven is a little different. I find about 15 minutes, so between 15 and 20, you might want to check it a minute or 2 before, because you don't want to over bake them, because then they get a little dry. So you want to bake them about 15, 18 minutes, somewhere in there, or until toothpick inserted into the center just comes out clean. I find about halfway through baking, I like to turn my baking pan front to back, just for more even baking. So So our orange date muffins are done. I've put the pan on a wire rack. I'm just going to let them cool like a couple minutes, maybe 5 before I take them out of the pan. And when we come back, we will try one. So my muffins have been cooling, about 5-10 minutes. So then I typically use a little offset spatula. You could use a knife and just, if you have to, just go around the outside of your muffin cup just to release it if you have a problem there. So now let us try one. Let's just, okay, so there's what it looks like inside. And I want a bit of a date there. If you can get this, eat these like freshly made, they're even better than when they've sat for a while. This is such a flavorful muffin. You got the dates, the little crunch of the walnuts. And I like that orange flavor. It's not overpowering. And a little cinnamon. And then because we used, you have the whole wheat flour, so that adds a lot of flavor to your muffin. And then the buttermilk gives it like a more bread-like texture. So this, try these. These are great. You can store them for a couple days, or you can freeze them. So until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com.